Okay, everyone, welcome to another episode of On the Wrist from Off the Cuff. Today I have a really fun segment brought to you guys by the team over at Belmont Watches. So thanks to channel sponsors like Belmont, I'm able to kind of stray away from your typical review and actually just get to some talking, guys, and consider some deep thoughts, like if the Tudor Black Bay is so good, why don't I own one, and kind of cover some of my thoughts on the pros and cons of such really an objectively outstanding timepiece. So a little bit about the brand. Tudor was founded by Hans Wilsdorf back in 1926 as an affordable alternative to the Rolex brand. And that is intrinsically what ties them to value proposition. From the very get-go, they've been a value-first brand. And maybe even to their own detriment once these pieces got more and more expensive. At the end of the day, Tudor is the value version of a Rolex. It's the cheaper version. At the end of the day, yeah, it's not going to supersede the Rolex. It's not meant to. It is really, if anything, it's enhancing Rolex's lineage and enhancing and elevating Rolex by the fact that Rolex Junior is doing so well. So, of course, you guys can see I have a bevy of 62 MAS reissues and reimaginings because I think they are quite comparable, but take a couple different approaches, and, you know, we'll discuss some pros, some cons. We'll do some comparing, some contrasting, and just kind of hash this whole idea out of, you know, why is this watch really so great and so well loved by so many? But honestly, if you go to a lot of watch meets, you probably won't find too many Tudor Black Bays on a lot of people's wrists. So with that said, let's go ahead, zoom the camera out, get these pieces in hand, and take a closer look. You're never just buying a watch, you're buying the seller too. Well, here's a seller I can absolutely recommend. Belmont Watches in San Diego. Adam and Anthony are the real deal, true collectors with an enthusiast's eye. Check out their well-curated and regularly updated selection at belmontwatches.com. Follow along for weekly drops, and if you don't see something you like, reach out and connect. They might just have a lead on one of your own Grail watches. I've personally purchased both new and used from them, and even used their servicing and repair network. From new releases to vintage references and everything in between, whether niche independence or the horological holy trinity, Belmont has you covered. With competitive pricing and quick shipping, you can enjoy a friction-free experience. So before your next big purchase, make sure to check out Belmont Watches and tell them Mark sent you. Okay, guys, first big shout out to Belmont Watches again for lending this particular piece in. It may even be sold by the time that this airs, but hey, the good news is if they don't have a piece that you're interested in stock and on hand, you can always connect with them, make a request, and they can try to source you the watch again. And also, I actually sourced this SJE 101 from them, and I love it. So let's get into it. So this is the watch. So let's go ahead and start here, guys. Why is this watch so good? I mean, we all love it. I'd say if you were to kind of boil it down, you know, I'm going to try to keep things relatively concise here. This is the ultimate value sweet spot, right? You're getting name recognition. You're getting, of course, history tied to one of the biggest and most successful Swiss luxury brands ever, being Rolex. And again, Rolex isn't necessarily known for making the finest elevated timepieces. They're just known for making the most desirable and the most popular, and honestly, some of the most secure financially that you can buy, right? So this is the ultimate value sweet spot. You can't argue with that. Again, another item is this is kind of a mid-tier grail. So for those that are kind of used to shopping in that entry-level space and they want to kind of step into kind of entry-level luxury / mid-tier, this is absolutely something that can be aspirational for a lot of folks. Also, it has that mainstream cool factor. There's, you know, David Beckham, Lady Gaga. There's a good amount of just general sales that casual shoppers can recognize, and you're going to get also some name recognition, brand recognition, model recognition. And if people don't mistake it for a Rolex, they will not, chances are they could also mistake it for a Tudor, and it would be a Tudor. They wouldn't be mistaken at all, right? So you're getting kind of a double dose, left and right, 1-2 punch of just like a lot of great factors coming together. Value, the kind of aspirational, aspect of it, and then also it is quite mainstream. Now, in terms of cons, which I feel like rarely get talked about within this space, especially for such a freight train of a lovable watch, I'd say, one of the cons would be something like this is honestly rarely the end game in watches. Yes, it can be aspirational for those that are collecting, and this can be, I'm not saying that it can't be, but oftentimes it's more of a gateway into more luxury purchases. You buy this, and then it's like, ooh, then I can step up, and maybe the Speedmaster's next. What other kind of iconic things? Oh, maybe I'm going to get a Rolex Explorer next, right? So this does oftentimes end up being more of a gateway and a stepping stone. I'd say probably equally as much as it ends up being like, oh, this is going to be just the nice watch that I own. Also, I would say in terms of, when you own this and you're wearing it and you wear it out in town and maybe have a conversation about it, there's not too much to talk about, because those who care about those elements already know, because this is such an exposed watch. This is a watch that people keep track on. They know all of the new specs, all of the new updates. It's in the news. It's very, very abundant and available. There's tons of videos covering this watch. So yeah, those who would care about some of the specs or those little eccentricities about this watch pretty much probably already know, right? Like if you walked up to a bunch of watch enthusiasts, again, you go to a watch group meet and you're wearing a black bay, you're not going to talk about it much, besides maybe if it's a new release, how hard was it to get on initial release. Also, there will always, this brand at the end of the day will always just be a more affordable alternative to Rolex. And this will always be a more affordable alternative to the Rolex Submariner. And that is something that is intrinsic to the brand's heritage. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's why they excel and dominate so much within that value proposition. So it's not, don't take that as a knock. It's just a reality, right? Like there's a give and a take, and there's a balance for you to be the ultimate value sweet spot. You are never going to be the pinnacle quality either. And that's fine. That's fine for a lot of folks, especially when, there's so many collectors that, certain qualities don't even get there, right? Like in terms of being mentionable, or people care about certain levels of finishes. And for, to address some of those items is, the nice thing is if this is sold out in your area, you can go to Belmont and check to see if they have this one in stock, because it is absolutely gorgeous. I did a full review. I'll put a link to that at the end. But so let's kind of discuss, now that that's out of the way, this is such a great watch, let's discuss some of the other watches that I kind of own instead of this beautiful Tudor Black Bay. Let's start with here, which is going to be the Seiko SLA017. Now, some pros here, guys. This is a certified modern grail. This is absolutely something. Due to its limited nature, it's increasing in value over time. That's something that's going to be different. Tudor is only going to go down in value. We'll see if this will eventually ever go up, but because of this watch being limited, it is, it's worth more now than its original sale price was, which was going to be, $4,300 MSRP, which a lot of people felt was overpriced. Now they're going for upwards of $5,000. You can get them for $4,000, grand or below, depending on, of course, condition and everything like that. But the norm, from what I've seen within the market recently, is around $5,000. This is also an enthusiast icon. Now, this is one that you will have a lot to talk about if you were to wear it because you just don't see them. They are a rarity. Within, again, that's all kind of tied into the limited nature. As much as people hate limited editions, there's reasons for them being so successful. But there are some cons to that, because the collectability definitely discourages everyday wear for a piece like this. Also, there are going to be tweaked variations available for less, whether it be different color variations or newer iterations in general. And also, it's less mainstream. So in terms of casual appeal, somebody who doesn't really know a lot about watches might not even know about this watch. Even if you're a collector of Seiko, maybe you're a big SKX Monster guy, you're from that era, it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to know a lot about this particular model. You might know the 62 MAS, but in terms of the significance of the SLA017, you might not know. And I mean, this thing is awesome. Full spec wise, gorgeous, 4 hertz beat rate. It only has a 50-hour power reserve versus the 70-hour power reserve of the Tudor, but the Tudor goes for about $4,550 MSRP, which is still more than this one was MSRP. And even as it's kind of risen in value, chances are you could still find them around a similar price, right? Around $5,000, or plus or minus, depending on condition, location, etc. But moving on to what I think is a very comparable piece here is going to be one of the more mainstream options, guys. Is going to be your Seiko Prospex SPB143 or SBDC101, depending on, this one was from Japan, so this is the 101. But the Pro's upper entry level icon, right? This surprisingly has a lot of broad appeal. That mainstream recognition is a lot of fun, especially within this space where Seiko has really gotten a resurgence within popularity. It's also very much a conversation piece, and that kind of goes into the cons, because sometimes you're conversating about some of that accuracy variance. This one runs great, but not everyone does run great. It also has a less refined bracelet. The 3 o'clock lume marker dial variants. You might have one with the pip, or you might have one with the beveled edge, depending on, which batch that you got from, early batch versus a later batch. So there's going to be that piece of it, but this is much cheaper at $1,200 MSRP, and often you can find these around $900. So when you start getting down into the value proposition, right, if you're really value oriented, sometimes your values prevent you from spending a certain amount of money. So that is definitely something to think about. But when you look at these head on, they have very, very similar proportions. As you can see, I think it's a closer comparison here at $1,000 basically watch versus essentially a $4,500 watch. I think visually they're going to look and wear very, very similar. Versus here, it's definitely more of a vintage, I think truer to form vintage variation. Although I will say when these SLAs were all being re-released, whether it be the Willard or the 6159, quote unquote, kind of grandfather of the Marine Master, Seiko was pretty open that they were creating these and also making changes to improve things that they didn't like from before, whether they were changes around the date window or the case shape or things like that, to really make them more modern. Not complete reimaginings, but more. It was more of a sweet spot of being true to form to the original while still trying to make improvements. So very nice. I mean, you see these two together. I mean, I feel like this definitely gives more of that vintage vibe versus here. It's a little bit cleaner, a little bit crisper. Even the lume, of course, this lume is going to be much brighter. You can already tell just by looking at the day lume. It already has a little bit of a green to it. But when you look at that, it definitely gives this more of a clean, crisp, kind of contemporary look. So where I find a really interesting comparison is going to be right here, right, with the new Marine Master, the SJE 101. Now, these MSRP for $2,800, still a fair amount cheaper than $4,550, but you can get them for typically around like $2,400, depending, right, because there's always going to be that little leeway in terms of negotiation and getting a little discount from your vendors. So these are also very comparable in terms of they're a little bit busier, right? There's a little bit of flash, a little bit of pizzazz. Look at the similarities on these bracelets, the more ellipsis-shaped links there, which is going to be really king for comfort. Of course, you're going to get this a little bit thinner, but you know what? Visually, not that much thinner, but it's a fair amount thinner, right? This is going to be 12.3 millimeters thick versus 13.5. So over a millimeter difference in thickness, and you're also getting a display case back. And you know what? Maybe you're not thrilled to see a Seiko movement, but this is a really great Seiko movement, and it's quite thin as well. And you're still getting full ISO, I don't want to say certification, but full ISO. There's another word I'm looking for. Someone in the down in the comments, help me out, guys. Compliance, ISO compliance. You're still getting, right, because you're having all of the full markers all the way around, 60-minute markers on the bezel insert. Also on the dial, you're getting the full balance. Here, you're also going to get something that's similar to a no date, except they do have the date still there. So if you're kind of indifferent about the date, you like the usefulness, but you don't necessarily want it jumping out at you, you're not looking at it to be a feature at 3 o'clock with a beautiful frame around it, like maybe you would look at for this bad boy right here, where I think the date really helps balance, and it's a part of the watch's design. Here, they definitely went a different route, and, this might upset more people, but it also might please a fair amount of people. But I look at these two, and I see, like, a lot of similarities in terms of, the cool factor, that kind of mainstream, some of those appeals, right? So for me, guys, when I look at the new Marine Master, some of the pros, upscale while still being well below $5,000. And when I say upscale, I mean in terms of the actual build quality, the component choices, everything like that. Like, this is actually on paper, a really nice piece. Even if to your eye you're not crazy about it, on paper, if you describe this watch to somebody, they'd be pretty excited about it, right? Small, thin size, packing a lot of great in-house goods. Also, it's uniquely familiar, and when I say that, that sounds like a bit of a juxtaposition, but it is, right? It's definitely a lot more unique than something like this, which is a lot more straightforward, to a skin diver, right? Even though it's paying homage to the original Seiko skin diver, here you're going to have a lot more ornate details, a lot more little character to it, which may, ultimately be polarizing, which falls into the cons. But again, it still looks like a dive watch. It still looks like a Seiko, and it has little fun details. Also, this, in terms of this has enthusiast level specs, with a casual design appeal. I think non-watch, idiot savants, they're gonna still like this watch, because if you're shopping and you're down at, let's say, at a watch dealer, or you're at the mall or whatever, and it's like this versus a Tag Heuer or a Longines, like, this is going to stand out, and I think this is going to be, in terms of its value proposition, it's going to be very competitive. Of course, enthusiasts are going to go down a completely different value rabbit hole and all this stuff, but to a casual buyer, this has a really great aesthetic that really sells a watch, because it looks like, it's a brand trying to earn your money, because it's doing all of these nice things and interesting things. Some of the cons, though, again, very polarizing. Also, pricey new versus some of the used mainstays, right? So, like, you could get other watches used, in this price point, some really nice ones, versus buying this new. Like, you can get, an old, Neo Vintage Seamaster or something like that at this price point. So that's unfortunate, but it's true, and it's something to consider. Also, the lack of positive buzz. Not a lot of people are wearing these watches. Not a lot of people are talking about them. It's not like James Stacy said this is the new darling, or Ariel Adams, or, TGV, or Teddy, or any of the big, YouTubers. Nico, I don't think has ever even seen this watch. So all of the big watch YouTubers, if they've talked about this, chances are they don't like it. And the ones, who might like it probably will never wear it, just because it's just in an awkward space where they're typically going to pay for different feature sets and different things at that point. So I think it's very unique, and I think, honestly, it will be quite collectible down the line. And I think ultimately, more of a conversation piece. Again, you're not going to see a lot of these, and when you do, there's so much thought that goes into something like this that, there's going to be a lot to talk about. Whereas I feel like, again, to its own detriment, this is like you think about the Speedmaster Professional. Nobody's going to ask you why you bought a moon watch. It's just the choice. It's the de facto choice. That's the same thing here. I feel like you know, this is, you might talk about why you chose this, what, over a Pelagos 39, over a Black Bay 58, over a Black Bay 54. But everything else, kind of everybody knows, like, why did you choose? Well, it's Rolex Junior, and it's amazing, and it's a great watch. It's well built. It has great feature sets, guys. Again, the full review is posted on my channel. So there's not as much, I would say, to talk about, and that's one of the funnest things about these, you know, this hobby is when you collect watches, you go to the meetups, you go have coffee, all those things, you go out to the dinners, the bars, you meet up, you talk watches, you talk about painstaking, like, this is an easy purchase, and I think that is, I mean, it's hard in terms of cash flow sometimes, right? Depending on your, upon kind of how you roll, right? What your price brackets are. But at the end of the day, this is an easy purchase because it's that good. So don't take any of this as a knock against the watch, but those are some things you got to think about, right? When you're building a collection, when you have something that you kind of agonize over, a lot of those times they can be the most satisfying. And this is a watch that I don't think there's much to agonize about because it's just that good. So will you have the same level ultimately of satisfaction? No matter how good it is, the fact that you didn't have to agonize about it, does that mean that you can't get the same levels? Just let's end on that note. So with that said, another huge thank you to Belmont Watches for lending this piece in and supporting the channel. But let me know what you guys all think down in the comments below. If you liked the video, please do like. And if you haven't already, please do subscribe for more content just like this. Thanks, guys.